Start the meeting, and we'll start with introductions. Welcome to the DYCD Youth Board Youth Committee meeting, the last one of the year. So we won't bother you again until the beginning of next year. So let's start by just going around in the room and doing introductions.
Bill Chan, Commissioner.
Hi, Executive Director of the Trustees of Sailors, Smart Harbor, and a consultant to not-for-profits.
I'm Melissa Papini. I work in Newburgh Berman in the Corporate Social Responsibility Department.
My name is Erica Larson. I'm a student representative.
Chris Neale, I'm the Director of the Workforce Development Board.
Maureen O'Connor, Senior Advisor for Education and Workforce at Queens Library.
Nathan Sumter, HR.
Anthony Yang, DYCD.
Sandy Gutierrez, Community Development.
Sarah Levitt, Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. Dr. Martinez, Assistant Commissioner in Workforce Development. Neale Locator, Center for Youth Employment.
Sandy Shaw, Director of Employer Engagement, Center for Youth Employment.
David Fisher, Center for Youth Employment.
Ronald Brown, Workforce Development Board.
Anuraag Sharma, ID and DYCD.
Tom Pendleton, Department of Education.
And I'm Kevin Ryan, Program Director at New York Foundation, and your chair for this meeting. Okay, so before we begin and get into the Commissioner's remarks, I wanted to pass along a few thank yous. And before I even do that, I just want to say I hope you all had a great holiday last week and that you're enjoying your holiday season. So just let me get into a few quick thank yous. So first, I want to thank those of you who volunteered to be a reader for the upcoming Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act RFP. I understand though, as soon as the notices went out, DYCD actually got enough readers. So we want to thank you who have volunteered and you're being placed on an alternate list. And if things change, you'll be contacted to join in as a reader. So thank you all again. We will be talking about the DYCD Smiles of Love gift drive. It's larger than expected, than it has been in prior years, but I wanted to just thank everyone who participated and who's considering participating in that drive. We want to make it as big as possible. Later this morning you're going to hear more details about it, but we really need your help to reach the goal that DYCD is set for that drive. So we'll get into the details of that later. I also want to thank Chris Neale and Scott Berger for their efforts to form a working group with the Workforce Development Board to help determine the number of private sector jobs they need to secure for the Summer Youth Employment and Ladders for Leaders in 2016. And at the December 10th meeting for the Workforce Development Board, the working group will present their plan for feedback and approval. And also wanted to actually thank you all for participating in this last year's Summer Youth Employment Program, and we're going to be reaching out to you again for your support this year, or let's say in 2016. So you will be hearing from us soon to see what we can do to really increase those numbers again in 2016. And then finally, I want to just inform you that Milga Morales, the Vice President of Student Affairs at Brooklyn College, has resigned from the Youth Board. Her duties at the college have increased, and she just could not, she just didn't have the time to continue to work with us. So we really want to thank her for her work on the Youth Board and her continued support outside of the Youth Board for the DYCD program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner.
Again, thank you. And again, I agree with Kevin. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. And even though as things slow down around us, things never seem to slow down at DYCD. And Anthony did a wonderful job in the report, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But there are a couple, I mean, it truly is amazing how committed and entrepreneurial our staff are. I mean, we could do the bare minimum, which is a lot of work, but then they always go the extra mile. You can see that in the different things that are happening around the agency. The two things I do want to highlight, and one is something that often gets taken for granted, is that at the end of the day, we're a contracting agency. Our job is simply to get money out the door, to get to nonprofits to make sure they provide services. This year was a perfect storm. We had $512 million in awards of contracts that started either July 1st or September 1st. 512 million, $500 million. Never in the history of the agency. And of course, the big challenge is to make sure these contracts get registered, and more importantly, people get paid. Because if people don't get paid, there are no services, and you'll read about it in the New York Post. And happy to say that we, despite challenges in the loan fund, because other agencies are having difficulty getting their contracts registered for a variety of reasons, the loan fund wasn't as available as it normally is. We got, I would say, 85% of the contracts registered, and those that didn't got loans, and so we were able to get money out the door, which is, we're paid to do. That's our bread and butter. And so while it's not glamorous, it requires a lot of effort from people who work behind the scenes, the budget people, the lawyers, the program staff, all of the nitty-gritty stuff that any of you who contract with the agency, with the city knows is no easy task. So I just want to highlight that, because sometimes we forget about simple things like that. The other thing which I've passed around, which I don't think made it to the report, is the Economist Intelligence Unit rated 35 cities around the world as far as how well they do to help young people advance economically. New York was ranked number 1, barely beat out Chicago. Number 2 in the world after Toronto. And they did this research independent of any contact with us, and so in the section which I footnoted, a lot of the DYCD programs are profiled. And so it's good to have perspective, as much as we see the work ahead of us and how more we need to do, it's nice to have a perspective that, well, we're better than most people. So, and it's all relative, but we beat Chicago, so that was one thing. And on that, I'll take any questions people might have, and otherwise we'll move on to the agenda. Any questions? No?
Great. So we're going to move on to the presentation on DiscoverDYCD. Yeah, we're going to.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anuraag Sharma. Again, I am the Chief Information Officer here at DYCD. And DiscoverDYCD is called DiscoverDYCD is our first small attempt at broadening, using technology to broaden our interaction with our CBOs and partners, as well as the participants that we serve. We are starting with first providing a location program services, location-based software technology that allows somebody to do a simple search and look at what DYCD has to offer in my zip code or in my district, and so on and so forth. And like I said, again, this is a first small attempt. The larger plan for us is to build a fully holistic DYCD portal where CBOs and partners can log in, participants can log in, and we know who they are. And once they are within our application, then we're able to provide them with a set of, using technology, set of services and options for them to interact with our program staff regularly, whether it is for technical assistance, whether it is for case management and enrollment of participants, whether it is for evaluations and monitoring and things like that, whether it is to subscribe to an event that you guys have or any other event. So again, like I said, this is the first attempt. We like your feedback, and then our hope is that eventually when this is public right now, as you can see from our NYC.gov site, but as it starts to get used more, we're anticipating more feedback to come in, and then cater the site to what people want and how they want it. So as soon as you log in, as soon as you hit the site from NYC.gov, you will basically come to this page where you have basic set of search options that are available to you. That is based on our program. If you drop this down, we've tried to make it very simple. Instead of calling the technical program names, we're trying to keep user-friendly program names so that the average family can go in there and do the basic search there. Then we have it by neighborhoods. And so we've listed all the neighborhoods in New York City, as well as the borough and zip code. So that's one aspect of the search, where we try to make it as user-friendly as possible. The second aspect of the search is in problem to the. So when you log in, and this site works with both your mobile device, your handheld, as well as a tablet or your desktop, it will default to your location, because as you know, with a smartphone, if you turn on your location services, the site knows, it can catch that and see where your location is, and based on that, it can give you your top 10 DYCD services near you at that particular location.
And I tried it, but I wasn't interested in that where I was.
Correct. So,
And I had trouble getting away from that.
understood. So, if you are not interested in where you are, but you're doing a search somewhere else, the search parameters that are available upstairs, so just scroll up. Right here. So you can do a borough zip code, and then if there's another option, so do advanced search. We wanted to make sure that the site is also useful not just for the average citizens, but also for the CBOs and partners and our program staff who have a little bit more knowledge about location. So we had things like sub-programs, by NDAs, by CDs, things that might be useful for the providers and CDs.
I'm sorry to continue doing that. What happened though was when I did that, it came a thing that said the provider, or whatever word was used for DYCD, is interested in where you are. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. And because I said no, that I didn't want to give my location.
Right.
And then it said it's interested in where you are, and then it got it.
But what I'm assuming, because I didn't see it, is what happens is when you're using it on the tablet or a mobile device,
It was on my phone.
it will tell you on your phone, it will tell you that the site wants to access your location information,
Yes, yes.
which is pretty standard for all phones. If you don't allow, it won't default to your location and you go forward. If you say okay, it will take your current location and give you 10 sites based on where you are. This is just a
I have
location.
to go back.
Yeah, but as soon as the site logs in and basically it says, are you allowing your the application to use your location service? So scroll down. So go back to basic search. So let's look for an after-school program in a particular zip code. Let's say somebody is doing that search. So it will list basically the sites. What we're presenting is the name, the telephone number, the website of the CBO if they have one. We will tell you what kind of program is running at that site. We'll give you hours of operation at that site. So some very basic information at that site. So if you, let's say, you're interested in this particular center, we'll give you exactly what's going on, what NDA it is in which CD, and so on and so forth. So we have some basic information here that is quick, easy to access for what you're looking for. And hopefully this is helpful. Close this. Right. So also on this side, as you can see, we have a little map feature. So if you pick a site, go to the address, and we'll give you directions on the site itself. It's from where you are to where the location is, and give you some directions that are walking directions up here, or driving directions or transport directions, whichever way. So, again, if you're interested, if you want to get there, there's some direction hub also on the site. So we're trying to make sure that we work with internal programs. Obviously, this is data that has to be up to date. We need to make sure that every time somebody is using it, they're getting the most up to date current DYCD program information. So we're working internally with program staff and these programs across the agency to ensure the accuracy of all this information, all this data that we can keep current so that it's useful. And again, this is our first attempt. We're trying to see. Yes, question.
I have a quick question. I went to one of the providers, I think it was Jewish Council. I was just paying around, and I went to jobs and programs. It took me to this. I went to the site, and I was looking for jobs and programs, and I couldn't find them. So, if a program is listed, I think it's great to have on maybe the landing page jobs and programs for this Compass programs, or I couldn't find it.
But you're saying that you don't just go to the generic site,
Right,
go to
right.
the actual
Right.
content page where the jobs are.
Correct, so if you have jobs and programs listed, there should be a, if you click on that link, you should be able to
Go
go to
directly
jobs
there.
and programs
Then
and not
that's
go to the website.
Definitely a great suggestion. Yeah, we'll definitely look into that and Google, because technically there's no restriction here for us to do that, and I think it makes more sense when user friendly. The other thing, to your point, that we are trying to think about is, what if somebody finds something that they're interested in, but now what? The options are either go to their site or give a phone call or anything, so we're seeing what other things can we do. Can we put in a small application form there, or other things that people can, from here on, do take the next step in terms of contacting the CBO or even putting in the application form that can go straight into the enrollment system for the next step to sort of follow. So things like that, and that's why we want to present this, because we want these kind of ideas to come forth, and where can we take this to the next level, what else can we do, how can we make it customer friendly for the customers in this stuff. So thank you for the suggestion.
My next point is one, just to refine it, the neighborhoods would be limited by the boroughs. When I was in the Bronx, and I had to look at that, but listen, I wondered, so I wondered if you could just, if you check the Bronx, only Bronx neighborhoods. Even Manhattan.
That makes sense. Correct. So especially because we're trying to have people use it on the smartphone, so a lot of scrolling doesn't make sense, so we're trying to filter it so that it's
Sometimes
easy.
there's similar names which are
Yeah.
in one borough and not the other.
Thank you. Great suggestion. Again, we'll make that, I think it'll be good user friendliness for the application to get through this quickly. So we'll do that. What has your other suggestion?
Well, the other was, I wondered if there could be like, maybe it's the programs that are different, if there could be brief description of what you're talking about for those the programs. Like, could there be a 2-sentence description? I know it seems obvious to those of us, but you have a definition of what is
What?
what
Sure,
does family support
sure.
mean?
Yeah.
Like 2 sentences or something, could there be a place to just
Yeah, I mean, what we could do is,
one definition?
right, put like an information icon right here. So if you clicked on it, it'll pop it up in a small screen, shows you exactly what the definition is. Close it, and then you right here. So not too much navigation, but gets you the information you're looking for. Absolutely, that can be done. Absolutely.
One of the other things which is not specifically on the site, but that I'm focusing was the Department of Education. There is a relationship that encourages the schools to either have signs or to have something so parents coming in to know that this does exist. Because the separation for parents is, if you know a community organization, then you know a community organization. But if you're, but numbers of kids who are unaffiliated to any kind of organization, at least in this way, is an additional way to be able to get the word out to both parents and kids.
Well, see, this is part of a larger effort
Yes.
that that these Williams or Deputy Planning Administration is heading up, is that to move away from this whole siloed government approach to program integration. And so, simple things. This is the high-tech version of it, but simple things that we never thought about doing, but like having an open house in a neighborhood where the Beacon Community Center or the Cornerstone Community Center host it, and all the DYCD funded programs can have an afternoon, set up tables, and then the community would come and walk around and get to connect. And then we did this on a small scale at Sunnyside last summer, and which was a bad weather day, like today. So the turnout from the public wasn't that great, but the groups that we funded spent the time networking because they never knew they existed. Which is the crazy part of things. We invest all this money in the neighborhood, and the groups don't even know they exist. So part of this is to help them figure out. But there's the low-tech stuff, like when a parent signs up their child for after school, they should get a one-pager of all the different programs that we fund in that neighborhood, so that when it comes to getting their older child signed up for somebody's employment, they may go to another program that's 6 blocks away. So it's to try to make government more user-friendly, which is the most frustrating thing that as someone who's been an activist, is like, there's so many different, it's hard to navigate.
I think you're also suggesting that an old tech might be a standard sign that says DYCD program,
Right.
and apps or whatever. Maybe they use the symbols they use there to show that the same services and apps are used in every building that has a
DYCD numbers.
The Department of Education will allow us to
Yeah,
put
exactly. It'll probably take 2 years.
That's your job, Tom.
Yeah,
your job. I'm sure there's some regulation against it.
Absolutely.
He's gonna go around with the sandwich board, in front of everything, right?
That's all, I mean, we had to show any other
Anuraag?
special. Yes.
She hasn't.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could include like the different programs that are going on at each center, so more transparency about, I guess, with each specific center, for example, who have after-school programs. That doesn't say a lot about. It doesn't say a lot about whether the center is open until 10, which is when a mother can pick her kid up or something like that. Or like maybe there's specific enrichment programs that that center has that no other center has in that surrounding neighborhood. So specifying your search like that. And actually I was quite curious, what are you completing the search on? Like, is this a SQL database that you're just like querying for each column table? Or are you importing a CSV file so the data is sort of static, which is why you need very accurate information coming in?
So the data is not static. What in our internal contracting systems and our internal enrollment systems, we do capture site level information by the program staff and the various activities and the outlets where this data is coming from for every single site. And then what we do is we take that data on a nightly basis, extract it out, and put it into the database that is running this particular site. So we're doing it on a very routine nightly basis. But your point is, we can have more detailed information, and that's the work, I'm and Denise were all working to say, okay, we got this, we're going to get these kind of questions from because now it's public. Let's make sure how much more granular can we get on the data so it becomes more specific. And your point is very valid. We're working towards it. So in version 2.0 for this, you will see that level of granular detail because it just makes sense.
And so if like 1,000 users try to use your site, there's not going to be a
There is no
crash.
performance issue. This is publicly available. We are making sure that the infrastructure behind it can handle the load. In fact, before launching it, we ran it for I think about 1,000 concurrent users, meaning everybody, 1,000 people hitting it at the same exact time, and the site worked with good performance. So we're making sure that once it goes public, it's got all that built in, so that it runs for multiple research.
The other thing we're going to add, which you didn't touch on, is we're going to have it translatable to different languages.
Correct. So that's again coming in version 2 as well, so that we can have an option to toggle between languages and do the same exact search.
If you have suggestions, should we?
Email them to me.
Oh.
Email them to me.
That's the question I had. Somebody knows usually a site. I didn't see it on the school. The ideas that we have here, what about those people in the area? They need comments to the website?
Well, so what we try to do is we try to give our Youth Connect information here. So if somebody did have a comment, they can call in to Youth Connect and they pass on this information to IT.
You can't do it through the site.
Not yet, but we can open that feature. We just sort of wanted people to call in so that.
Comment section.
Yeah. The reason was because Youth Connect gets a lot of these calls for searches and information and stuff. So we wanted to sort of merge the site feedback and what Youth Connect receives together into sort of one set of feedback that we can start putting in the site. But we can think about it. There's no technology restrictions to say email your feedback here, click here, and then the email comes in. We can definitely consider that. So we just put this in.
By the way, that same information, talking about returning to the HRA, is to be able to give information to parents of HRA, which, it can be as simple as a flyer or it can be attached to some other kind of information that they're receiving in some way, because you want to get the word out. I think that parents, a bit of a gross generalization, I think that parents who are accustomed to finding programs for their kids or accustomed to finding programs for kids, and their needs out, parents who don't really realize what's available.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We would love to, again, like you said, this is our first small step to get more outreach out there. But we'd like to have people use it. We'd like to get more feedback. We'd like to improve it. And we're working. Version 2 is underway. And so this is good timing to get all this feedback for us.
And I think there's also how would an agency, if an agency is listed here, how will they know when people are using this site to get to them, so that there's at least some feedback about how people are using it, getting to their solution, what is the process?
So what we did in version 1 of it, and I don't know, Buddha, do you have that analytics link here?
Yes.
What we have built in for our own purposes is some sort of reporting. So we are capturing some data on what zip codes are people searching for, and what percentage of what devices are people searching from at a higher percentage, what types of program categories are they searching for. So if the after school is the most searched qualified for internship, what borough are we looking at? And then within the borough, we are also looking at whether Manhattan or Brooklyn have some difference between what programs people care about. So we started some basic capturing of data. Hopefully that's helpful to see what people are using it as, and then we use this also as a feedback mechanism.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Will there be any marketing collateral around this site?
Yeah, so when we launched this towards the end of the summer, we wanted to sort of test it internally just to make sure we got the data correct, we got some feedback from folks like you. And now I think we're kind of ready with launching it with some social media tweeting and some marketing. Because you're right, we need some marketing to spread the word. People don't know this exists, and the usage is going to be limited. So we would love to have more people on it because that only helps improve it. So we're working to get some marketing strategy. No, so there's not a specific timeline, but there is a specific plan. Like I was saying, this is one small part of our major outreach. That bigger outreach includes the portal, it includes a mobile app that is Android and iOS compatible, so iPhones and Android phones can have it. What we're just not showing yet is what else can we do. Our thinking is if the mobile app just offers a location service, that's probably not enough for somebody to download it and install it on their phone. So what else can we give the average person who's getting our DYCD mobile app on their phone? What else can we provide for them? What other content can be exciting for them or useful for them, so that they can use the app? So we're working on that, but yeah, we'll definitely get a mobile application. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the Workforce Development Board update.
I can't be here and there.
Thank you.
It's in the middle of the table.
For those of you who came in who have started, I'm Chris Neale, I'm the Director of the Workforce Development Board. It started about 6 months ago. And I just want to give folks a brief update. As some of you may know, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, federal law, passed and took effect on July 1st of this year. It was the first change to that particular part of the workforce development system funded by the federal government, the first change in 17 years. So it was a pretty major landmark change. And it's a reauthorization of the bill that came before it via the Workforce Investment Act. So it's not a radical departure, but there are some important changes, and I wanted to talk a little bit about those. For the board, for the Workforce Development Board, of course, this group is a combination of DYCD's Youth Board and what used to be called the Youth Council of the Workforce Development Board. Now, the Youth Council used to be mandated under WIA. It's no longer mandated, but we decided, in conjunction with DYCD, it made a lot of sense to continue to focus on youth, such an important part of New York City. And so now we're calling ourselves the Youth Committee, no longer the Youth Council, so there's one radical change. Still, the acronym is still YC. This is, members, some of you are part of the Youth Committee. And then the board, the broader board itself, just so you know, it used to be called the Workforce Investment Board, and now it's the Workforce Development Board. So again, radical changes happening in all levels of government. But there were some new pushes with the overall board and the approach to the system. So there were some key changes in WIOA. So things like a real emphasis on investing more in skill building, and it actually mandates a focus on career pathways, which is nice because it aligns with the report that the city released a year ago. The career pathways, one city working together, which really sort of doubles down the city's effort to emphasize skill building and bridge programs and different things to really help people build their skills rather than being so focused on rapid attachment as the city was for about 20 years. Other changes are a very strong emphasis on serving people with disabilities, a priority, at least, a priority for low-skilled populations generally, and then also increased levels of coordination among different programs funded by WIOA. So, a lot of people here may be familiar with sort of the adult programs that the Department of Small Business Services operates, the Workforce and Career Centers and the like. Then there's DYCD's workforce programs, in this case, out-of-school youth and in-school youth. But then there are other programs funded by this federal legislation that we don't really partner with that often or didn't in the past. Adult education. So ESL, adult basic ed, high school equivalency preparation, Wagner-Pizer, which is New York State Department of Labor, and then finally Access VR, which is vocational rehabilitation, so employment, education, and training for people with disabilities. So under WIOA, there's a lot more emphasis on these different streams coming together. They're now all going to have more or less the same performance measures, which is definitely a departure. And so the emphasis really is on greater alignment and coordination across these different programs. And so I guess that's sort of a transition to the discussion item, which I'm grateful to the Commissioner Anthony for giving me a little time on, is a discussion of resources for DYCD youth employment providers. So under WIOA, there were 10 required program elements for any youth programs. And that has expanded to 14 under WIOA. And two of the newest ones are financial literacy education and entrepreneurship skills training. So I wanted to talk and get some feedback from this group on a couple of those things. But I wanted to relate a story first, which is that the New York City Employment and Training Coalition, which is a membership organization of workforce development providers in New York City, they put together a sort of a listening session to provide feedback on the out-of-school youth and in-school youth concept paper, and DYC staff graciously attended that. But one of the interesting things that some of the people pointed out was when it came to mentoring services, people were sort of saying, in some cases, if they didn't already have a mentoring program, you can't just jump into that, right? You have to have background checks, you have to really make sure that the mentors understand what the program is about and are going to be really good supports for the young people that they're working with. And that got me thinking a little bit, which is, I think there's a little bit of a parallel with financial literacy and entrepreneurship skills, which is, how can the city and how can we support these providers that are applying for these new out-of-school youth and in-school youth contracts with these new kinds of services? Are there ways that we can support them? And so, I think DYC very smartly offered up to 45% of the out-of-school youth contracts to be through, can be subcontracted. So they already understand that partnership is a big part of WIOA. And as we like to say around our office, if you're doing it alone, it's not a career pathway. And that's a quote from the Center for Law and Social Policy class, but somebody that focuses a lot on career pathways. But there's this acknowledgement that there's partnership needed, and we have to try to leverage our different expertises and competencies. So I guess with all that as sort of background, I guess the questions that I wanted to pose to this board are, in light of this need for financial literacy education and entrepreneurship skills training, and in light of the fact that there are going to be roughly 24 out-of-school youth contractors and more in-school youth contractors, how do you launch a new service with consistency, with quality, and with scale? And how could DYCD and the city support these providers in ensuring that these services are quality and that they're effective? So I wanted to offer a broad question, and I don't know if folks have thoughts or responses about supporting providers in delivering quality services that are new, in some cases for many of these
Actually, I think my voice carries. Is
you got to talk into it for the
video. Is if I understand your question, There are clearly organizations in the city whose main expertise is that particular area, whether it's financial literacy or entrepreneurship. And my recommendation would be not only that they get, not each individual contractor necessarily subcontract with that organization or organizations, but rather, and presumably, I don't know whether it's through, whether it's SBS or whether it's DYCD, to contract with these agencies to do training of staff at the organizations, and there's several reasons to do that. One is if you take something like financial literacy, more and more we should be embedding that in every kind of program that we have because it affects every single person. By training the staff, the worst that happens, the staff moves on to someplace else, but they know how to do this. So I think that it should be at the highest level, training staff to be able to help their client base. It doesn't mean that there can't be subcontractors. You see a subcontract where organization A subcontracts to organization C, whose expertise is financial literacy. You can still do that. But I think that there should be a very, very serious training. Everyone wants to know how to do this. If I could just give you a personal example, many, many years ago, long time, it was right after 2001, 9/11, and where I was, I got a very, very large amount of money. And one of the things to do was financial literacy. And we hired somebody, we put together curriculum and the rest of that. I then tested it on my staff, the entire staff of the organization, including security guards. And everybody asked me, why was I doing that? And I lied. And I said, oh, because it's a focus group. I want to be sure that it's good. That wasn't the reason. The reason was almost every single person on the staff wanted to know and needed to understand about financial literacy themselves. So I think that there are many kinds of goals, but I do think that take experts and train every staff person in organizations that are then going to do it. Organizations that, again, have the